In today's video, we will talk about how we can print and input arrays. So let's suppose we have this array. So now we have an array called. Let's make a new array. So let's make an integer array. You can create array of any data type and let's call it nums, and let's give it a size of 3. Or instead of doing that, we can simply uh, create an elements here, our elements here, and let's suppose these are our elements. I'm gonna change it to 77. So this is another array, and these are our elements. And let's see how we can print each element. So one way is used to print each element one by one, like this. Like first we are gonna print element at 0th index, then we are gonna print element at first index and so on. So let's run it. As you can see, we got our elements 533, but these are just two elements. Suppose you have an array of 100 elements. It will be very tedious to print each element one by one like this. So the right way to print arrays to use the for loop or the while loop, but for loop is far simpler in this case. So first of all, you have to use the for keyword. Then then our elements, they won't matter. To access each element, we need an index. So the value which will change will be our index. Let's look at our array here. First our index is 0, then 1, then 2, then 3, and then 4. So uh, the main thing that will keep changing for each element will be the index. So we will use our index as our counter variable. So let's create a variable called int I. Let's initialize it to 0. Since our first index is 0, that's why we are initializing it to 0. So we start from the first index, the first value. Then we wanna go up to as long as I is less than length length of this array. So we can simply type 5 here. But suppose you don't know the size of an array. In that case, you have to use the length function. So as we saw in the previous video, length returns the total length of the array. So the length of this array is 5 since there are 5 elements. So we will go up to length minus 1. Why length minus 1? Let me show you in a moment. And I plus plus. After each iteration, we need to increment the value of I. And why I'm doing a nums dot length less than equal, or you can do less than equal to nums dot length minus 1. So it will keep printing it as long as it is less than or equal to nums dot length minus 1. Why I'm doing that? Remember, an array starts from 0. So our index starts from 0. So we count from 0. That's why our last index is length minus 1. So now this is an array of size 5, right? But our values are, let's look at our indexes. This is 0th index, this is first index, this is second, this is third, this is fourth. So as you can see, our last index is 4. The reason is the counting from 0. We count from 0 in arrays, or we can't change it. It's pre-built or predefined. So that's why we go up to length minus 1. If we go up to length, we will also access the fifth index, which doesn't even exist. So that will create a problem. Our program will throw an error. So now in the array, we have to print each element. So we can simply print now we have to print each element. We can access an array of and each element by index. So I'm gonna write nums I. So it means print whatever is at I index of nums array. So let's run our program. As you can see, our full array is getting printed here. Our each element is getting printed. So that's how we do it. And instead of doing less than equal to -1, you can simply do less than, since it will only go up to length -1. And whenever it gets to length, it will automatically break. You don't have to do the other way. But if you don't want that, you can use that as well. Both are fine. And now we have printed each element. Let's see how it works. So first our I is 0. Our I is initialized to 0. And then it it is then it will check that I is less than equal to nums dot length. I is less than equal to 5. 0 is less than 5. That's true. It will come into the body of the loop. It will see what is at nums 0. So at nums 0 5 is stored. It will print 5, and it will print a new line after printing 5, since this is the println function. Then it will go up. It will increment I by 1. This time it will check again. 1 is less than 5. Yes, that's true. It will again print, but this time it will print the value at first index. Similarly, it will go up to 4, and after printing the fourth index, it will increment I, which is 5, and 5 is not less than 5. It is equal to 5. Therefore, the loop will break, and our program will exit. Now let's suppose you wanted to print each element, all elements on the same line. Simply you have to use print instead of println. So as you know, print function doesn't print a new line after printing each element. Let's run our program. As you can see, each element is getting printed here, but there is no space between them. So after printing each element, we want to insert an extra space. So now we have an extra space. So now, as you can see, each element is on a single line. And after this loop has completed, that all elements have been printed, that means the loop has completed its execution. And we simply have to use println function to insert a new line. So after doing the printing array, make sure to use this function so it prints a new line after it finishes. If you don't use it, let me show you what happens. Let's suppose you print a simple text after it. So as you can see, the text is coming on the same line. That's why you use a print function first, println function first, so it prints a new line. And after that, you can print whatever you want here. So this is how you print an array. Now let's take inputs from the user. So let's create an array of different in different way. Let's create an integer array of size 6, or you know what, let's create a double array, or let's stick to integer for now. We'll see more about other data types later. And let's take input. To take input, to first let's see how you want to store a value. We already know that how we can store a value. Similarly, you can take input and store that value into a particular index. For example, if you want to uh, take input from the user and store it into the 0th index, you have to print the message that enter 0th element, and then you can use the num0. And then you have to use, first we have to create an object of the scanner class so it can be used for inputs. So now if we use the input.next function, next int function, now it will take an integer from the user and it will store at num0. So let's try printing the value of num0 as well. So we know that we got our input right. So as you can see, now it's asking for the 0th element. Let's enter 8888. As you can see, it is getting printed here. So now we got our input. But suppose you want to obtain all 6 elements at once through a loop. So loop is the convenient way to take inputs. So similarly, you can use any variables. I prefer I. And since one more thing, since this variable has been declared inside the for loop, after the for loop it will be destroyed. So as soon as this for loop has executed, our I variable will be destroyed from the memory. You can use it again after it or before it. So if we have declared I before it, suppose we have declared I already before it, it is giving a duplicate error. But if we create an I after this one, after the execution of our loop, if we create I, as you can see, it isn't giving any error. It has created I, which is a new variable. So remember, this will only exist as long as this loop is running. And we want to do the same thing. I is less than equal to nums.length. And after each iteration, we want I plus plus. Here we are gonna print the message. You can print any message you want. I'm just gonna print that enter element, because that's all I need, I guess. And then I'm gonna use nums I to access the ith index, and I'm gonna store the integer input from the user into this ith index. So after that, let's also print the values, so we can now our program is running 5. So it's asking for elements. Let's enter 1 first, then 2, then 3, then 4. As you can see, each element is entered one by one. So 5, 6. So we stored 1 to 6 elements, and as you can see, all elements are getting printed here. So we got our input right, and we managed to print all these elements. And so this is how you take inputs, and we got our inputs done. And similarly, you can take other inputs I want to make sure everything is clear. So here we take input, we first take input at the 0th index, then the first index, then second, third, fourth, and so on. It is similar to the print function. And suppose now we have a string array. So to create a string array, simply replace int with string and replace this with string. Everything will be the same. You can change the name if you want. Let's change the name also. Let's change it to names. You have to change the name everywhere now. You have to write names here as well, here as well, and here. And here we have to use next line function instead of next int. So let's change the size also. Let's change it to 3. You don't have to change it, but I change it. So let's run it. It's asking for elements. So let's enter the first element, Arthur, then John, then Jake. As you can see, it is printing all 3 elements, all 3 strings through this loop, and through this loop it took the inputs. So that's how we take input and print elements. So that's it for today's video. Thank you for watching.